I thought I might take a few moments to present some of the elements of the Making the Connection model that I've been talking about. There are 4 elements to it: visioning the future of physiotherapy, distributed leadership and decentralization, diversity and transparency, and the final one being unlocking value for membership in world physiotherapy. So the first one is visioning the future of physiotherapy. As we all know, there's been a significant amount of changes from a socio-political perspective and technological perspective since the pandemic. And so the big question is, how do we prepare for the future rather than responding to it? So one of the points that I'd like to bring forward is to create a task force that would be diverse in its distribution, inclusive of all the regions and all the different member organizations, such that we seek to envision what the future would be for our profession rather than be reactive to it. And so within the first 6 months of the election, we'll create a task force. Within the first 12 months, the global listening sessions will have occurred. And by the 18th month of this election, we will have a blueprint for the future of physiotherapy. The second will be to establish a group of futurists who will meet and discuss and try to predict the future of physiotherapy. Questions like, how will an interface like ChatGPT impact physiotherapy and its practice across the distribution of high, middle, and low-income countries? There are some companies like Slack, which is a operational or an organizational communication strategy and software that is now using artificial intelligence as part of its platform. And so understanding these changes to the technologies will allow us to see where the future is, understand the elements that will start to interface with each other to change that future. And then ultimately, we could use this information to understand what the competencies of future are going to be and not of the past. As I've said before, the best way to predict the future is to create it. The second element of the Making the Connection model is decentralization and transparency. Now, many questions have come up around this idea of decentralization. Why would we decentralize, or why do organizations politically decentralize or look towards this as a strategy? Well, it's to drive efficiencies. It's to look at cost containment, create innovation, engage with people, have people more involved in, let's say, the DNA of that organization, but also to understand some of the nuances, some of the needs and interests that are not at a, let's say, a central level, but at a local level. There are risks, though, when you look at decentralization. Inconsistencies, doubling of efforts, and possibly even a dilution of brand. But in 2023 and beyond, this notion of decentralization is not going to be unique to physiotherapy or healthcare. It is an environment, a change to the environment that I think we need to capture and really to be leaders in. And so there are 2 ideas. The first would be to develop an approach where the regions and the member organizations have greater influence over the agenda of what's happening at World Physiotherapy. That's not to say that they're not involved now. Completely not what I'm trying to say. What I suggest is that we need to go even farther. In French, on dirait jusqu'au bout. You need to go all the way through to the end to make sure that we have an engaged society of colleagues and of organizations. And a decentralized approach to that is one of the modern approaches to organizational behavior that I think would really push us into the future. The second part of transparency and decentralization is to create 2 new permanent board members of the executive board for World Physiotherapy. The first would be a representative from the subgroups. The subgroups, in my opinion, are where the incredible clinically relevant action is happening. They're the ones who are pushing the envelope in terms of what we do as physiotherapists across the world. And so I think their voice is really important. I'm not sure how loud or how inclusive that voice has been in the past, but I would like to see it as part of the executive board. The second position would be for an external public member. We introduced this in the Canadian Physiotherapy Associations. Many others have also gone in this direction, where you have somebody not from physiotherapy, not tied to the practice or the policies of physiotherapy, but somebody who can come from outside to provide insights, to provide a different perspective of board governance and board direction. Think if we had, for instance, an executive from a global bank, or somebody from within a multilateral agency, a funding agency, sit on the board of World Physiotherapy. Imagine the absolute amazing, interesting and informative aspects that they would bring to the discussions, and ultimately unlock, again, a lot of the value that we need to unlock in physiotherapy. Now, the third pillar is diversity. The world is changing, and we are now entering a time when debate, discussion of past can and should be had. Many recent examples of coming to terms with the past and issues around diversity, inclusion, and even treatment are now for the forefront of many political discussions. In Canada, we, some years ago, from a federal perspective, launched what was called the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, which was an approach to understanding the past and the past misgivings that were enacted upon First Nations populations. The Australians have done very similar for their Aboriginal communities, and have, again, reckoned with some of the important elements of the past. I'm not sure that we're there, but we're on a process. We're on a move towards understanding greater diversity and inclusiveness across our countries. And so the question that I'd like to ask is, how does diversity, inclusion, or maybe the lack thereof sometimes in physiotherapy, and how does it affect our practice? How does it affect our organizations? Inclusivity has, in my opinion, has an impact on the people we treat, the constitution of our organizations, and it is something that we need to reckon with. Here's, I think, where we can start. The first one is to improve on the country profiles, which are already excellent, by the way, and much better than they were in the past, to feature more elements of diversity than simply percentages of females in a population or within a member organization. Diversity and inclusion includes a series of other elements that are key to understanding, and knowledge is power here. In my opinion, we need to create something of a minimal data set on diversity and inclusion that all countries, all member organizations would collect and would report on a regular basis, such that from a global perspective, we can understand who we are as a profession, where we come from, and what are some of the pinch points, what are some of the stressors around inclusivity that we need to address. The second point I'd like to bring up is that I'd like to see World Physiotherapy develop a set of guidelines, a set of directive measures through which we would be accountable for. So in other words, in all of the activities and all of the, whether it's a board composition, whether it is a task force, whether it is a consultant group that is providing services to World Physiotherapy, that we ensure that before enacting anything, that we have a series of guiding values and checkpoints to ensure that we are living our aspirations of being a globally diverse and inclusive organization. And these guidelines, I suspect, and I would suggest, should become transparent, and so that all members across all countries can ensure and hold account World Physiotherapy for a dedication towards better inclusivity and certainly more diversity within all that we do. The fourth and final element of the Making the Connections model is unlocking value for membership. We are one, but we are not the same. And what one member organization might understand as being valuable to them may not be a value for another organization. And so as I've been speaking to people around the world, this has come up as probably the most important talking point, is at times the value for membership is not clear. At times, the presidents of member organizations have to respond to their members, those who are paying their dues, of where the value is. Now, I personally, and all of you here will agree with me that there's significant and tremendous value for membership. But the question becomes, do we always show that? Have we demonstrated that across the board? And again, because of the great diversity that we have in terms of our constituents, large and small, north and south, east and west, different MOs have different aspirations towards value and unlocking value for membership at World Physiotherapy. So I'd like to suggest 4 different elements where we can unlock and drive more value for membership. And the first one is to look at percentage of membership among MOs existing in World Physiotherapy. There are some MOs where they have 100% membership. That means of all the physiotherapists in that nation, they're all members of their association. Now, reaching 100% happens whenever it's mandated. So within the orders or within government societies where in order to practice, you have to be a member, yes, they have 100%. But in other areas where membership is volunteer-based, that number fluctuates quite a bit. Even in Canada, my home organization, my home member organization, was in the neighborhood of 60 to 70%, and now we're in the I think high 40s, close to 50%. Other countries are a lot lower, others are high, and so I would like to initiate a directive, a plan over the next 36 months of election to seek to place a milestone of 50% in all organizations who are currently members of World Physiotherapy. That is to look towards all of the countries that are below a 50% membership and to work alongside them to understand why or why not to be members of their national association. I think it's in all of our best interests to work together and to look for best practices. There might be some really wonderful practices that happen in one part of the world that can be applied elsewhere, and then we can drive membership. And if we start driving higher membership, then we can look at unlocking even more value by using some of those resources to be relevant in certain areas. As an example, if we were to increase by 15%, so that's 15, we would see an additional 100,000 members be part of World Physiotherapy across the different member organizations. I think that should be our goal, and I would work towards achieving that. The second is becoming an industry leader in customer service. Now, that's not to say that the customer service currently being provided is nothing but the best. It's absolutely amazing. It's certainly a lot better than it has been in my entire career. The customer service and the dedication of the staff at World Physiotherapy is incredible. But I think we can do better. I think we should all be looking to do better. And so how do we start becoming that global leader in terms of customer service? We could do it in a lot of different ways. We could promise things like response time. We could promise activation of ideas. We could promise much more in-depth sort of involvement of member organizations. And so I think we need to become one of those global leaders in customer service. And if we did, I think that's where we would see an extreme amount of unlocking of value. The third, in my opinion, and I would hope many of you would agree, when we stop learning, we become stale and we risk becoming irrelevant. As I spoke to many member organizations in lower resource settings, access to reasonably priced continuous professional education, or CPD, is one of their primary objectives. And it is one of the most difficult elements for them to deal with. And so I propose that we create something that we would call World Physiotherapy Learning Collective. And it would be a clearinghouse of activity where those seeking continuous professional development or courses can be met by a supply side. So that would be other physiotherapists or organizations around the world willing to provide reasonably priced continuing education. And so all of a sudden we would be matching the supply and demand, all for the one purpose of driving better quality outcomes. And so this clearinghouse, this World Physiotherapy Learning Collective, would be another way for us to start understanding each other. Historically, I think a lot of the, let's say, clinical courses came from instructors from high-income countries, oftentimes, teaching courses around the world. I think that there is plenty of opportunity, important opportunity for instructors from lower resource settings to provide high quality education to people all over the world as well. Just as an example, the emergence from infectious disease and the relationship to rehabilitation has become highlighted in the pandemic period. Well, in a lot of parts, in a lot of areas where infectious disease is endemic, there are plenty gold standards. There are plenty guidelines that they use that we could learn from in, let's say, Canada or other higher income countries. So a meeting place and blending of the mind that would amplify the work that's already happening inside of the learning hub. The third and final might sound a little bit superficial, but it's not. It's actually critically important in my mind, and that is to amplify the recognition programs for physiotherapists. So that is the awards and recognition programs that happen within World Physiotherapy. At the moment, we have many different awards that are given out at every General Assembly, or sorry, at every Congress. But I would suggest that we look towards amplifying those, possibly renaming them. I'll give you an example. The Humanitarian Service Award, I think, should be rebranded and to be named after some of the giants in our profession. As an example, we might think about something like the Alberto Cairo Humanitarian Award, or yet the Valerie Taylor Humanitarian Service Award. Awards that are named after some of the giants that have walked and still walk among us in this profession. An extension of that, as an idea, I would also establish something called the Fellows of World Physiotherapy, which would be loosely built off of the APT, the American Physical Therapy Association's Catherine Worthingham Fellows. And these are every year in the APTA, a group of new fellows are inducted into the fellowship. And these are to recognize the significant, noteworthy, and consistent contributions among members of the APTA, according to a set of guidelines. I would implement a new program that would be at the global level, so that every time we meet as a global community, that we induct a new series of fellows into the Fellows of World Physiotherapy. This group could also be very useful as we seek input, again, and connections from around the world. Accomplishing all four of these interactive pillars, I think, would unlock value like we've never seen before in this association. And I look forward to hearing some of your thoughts, whether you agree or whether you disagree. There are plenty parts of this website where you can add your thoughts. So I look forward to hearing from you, and thank you very much.